Hey everybody, Alex Kazora, SteelersDepot.com, back with some Pittsburgh Steelers news and analysis here in the offseason, but the Pittsburgh Steelers keeping us all busy. Three recent additions to their coaching staff: a receivers coach, O-line coach, and senior assistant slash linebackers coach. So I wanted just to take a moment here to talk about and give my quick thoughts on the hires of Fris Jackson, Pat Meyer, and Brian Flores. I'll go in order in which they were hired, starting with wide receivers coach Fris Jackson coming over from Carolina, replacing Ike Hilliard. That move was made all at once, Hilliard's departure and Jackson's hiring. So that was a bit of a surprise, just the timing of it all. Pittsburgh really good at keeping a secret. It feels like Jackson and Hilliard on paper have a pretty similar resume, played in the NFL, a decent amount of coaching experience. Jackson a bit more than Ike Hilliard, but they kind of bring that NFL perspective to the group. Relatively young hires as well. Jackson, 42 years old. I like that Jackson has recently been in the college and pro game. He was in Baylor, working for the Bears, and followed Matt Rule, I believe, to Carolina. So he was with Baylor in 2018, 2019, I believe, and then Carolina in 2020 and 2021. So he has that recency in both worlds, the college game and what receivers are like there today, and then also obviously coming from the NFL game as well. So he can kind of relate to the new guys, the older guys pretty well. What I like about Jackson and what separates him from an Hilliard in terms of the resume is that Jackson is a former quarterback, and that was a brief time he played his final couple years in college at Western Illinois as a receiver, but in high school and for 2 years at Northern Illinois, he was a quarterback. Now he'll admit the numbers bear this out. He was not a very good quarterback. There's a reason why he moved to wide receiver, but I think he has the perspective of what a quarterback thinks and sees and reads and makes the decisions that he does, and he's talked about that in interviews. He can answer the why on a play a lot better because he has that perspective of being a former quarterback. And so I think just teaching some young guys and maybe some guys who get frustrated, don't totally understand the big picture type of stuff, which can happen with receivers from time to time. I think that's going to be an asset. Now, is that the say all end all? No, but I did like that part of his resume. In the interviews and coaching clinics and teach tapes that I found of his, it wasn't anything incredibly unique, something that, probably every receivers coach teaches: being physical, working on releases, being able to sell routes and stuff like that. So that is all well and good and important. I think he's a good coach overall, it seems like, but probably nothing incredibly radical or unique compared to any other coach. But I think he's young. I think he connects with guys pretty well. And again, having that former NFL player background and former quarterback background, I think it's definitely an asset in the hire. The biggest thing Jackson will have to do as the receivers coach, I think, is detail and really getting these receivers, Deontay Johnson, Chase Claypool, whoever else will be in that mix. There's some uncertainty in that room with Juju, James Washington being free agents. Washington almost certainly going to leave. Juju, I think, will leave, but there is a chance he will return. Ray McLeod also scheduled to be a free agent, but just overall, especially with Deontay and Claypool, working on detail in terms of hot reads, in terms of blocking. Claypool, he's a big guy. He's got to be a better blocker, more consistent, show more effort than he did in that regard. So, I think consistency is one element, but more specifically, it's about doing some of those little things better and more often and with more, I think, kind of aggression and passion. Because while overall I think there's certainly talent in that room, Deontay had a really strong third season, and Claypool obviously is capable and talented despite his sophomore slump. I thought that receiver room overall was just too sloppy last season. So detail, name of the game in 2022 for Frisman Jackson. The next hire was Pat Meyer to replace Adrian Clem and Chris Morgan as the Steelers' offensive line coach. Clem hired to be the full-time head offensive line coach in 2021, lasted just 15 games before leaving to take the same job at Oregon, replaced by Morgan, who then in turn left for the Chicago Bears job. And so Pat Meyer also coming over from Carolina alongside Frisman Jackson to the Pittsburgh Steelers coaching staff. And I know when the news broke and it wasn't Mike Munchak, it wasn't a big quote unquote name guy, Steeler fans weren't happy with that. And I'll off the top say I think this is an average hire overall. I think it is tough to evaluate position coaches, and certainly their product and how their guys plays based on what talents brought in and injuries, a little bit of luck and all those kinds of things. But I was able to find a lot of information on Pat Meyer's philosophy, specifically in pass protection. And I'll put a link in the description to the article I did breaking down what seems to be his entire philosophy on pass pro. And I would just say overall, it's a looser, more progressive system. It's not quite as old school as some O line coaches probably teach it. Meyer's a relatively younger guy, as well. I think maybe in his late 40s or so. But I think he has a structure, of course, but allows guys to kind of do what they have to do to get the job done. And so it might not always look pretty and quote unquote teach tape, but some of this stuff is taught. For example, there will be times where guys spin and butt block sometimes, or they'll spin around and do a 360 to execute a block if they're beaten that badly and they're unable to recover. And that'll be taught and repped in practice. And odds are pretty good you're going to see that in game. So it'll be stuff that looks kind of funny and looks like it's just guys trying to make stuff up on the fly, but it is taught and it is all under the idea of just get the job done. Meyer also teaches independent hands, and so the idea of the two-hand punch, while he will use it in some instances, and I lay that out in my article, generally speaking, it's more independent hands, high-low hands, as opposed to that two-hand punch. And so that'll be something. And I don't can't speak too greatly on how often that was used last year, but I think again, Meyer's a little bit more new school, and that is certainly a newer philosophy of the independent hands that a lot of the younger O line coaches and guys like Duke Manyweather really coach and rep. So I do look forward to that. Meyer also wants his guys to be really aggressive, and I know that every O line coach says to be aggressive, and that's not uncommon, but it is a little bit less uncommon for pass protection. And then specifically when he says be aggressive, it's not a just put somebody in the ground, which is common for the run game. And I'm sure he probably feels that way. Again, every O line coach does, but it's being aggressive with your sets and not giving ground and being able to attack and what he calls chase down sets, which is basically jump setting guys and going after guys and some stuff that you really haven't seen in Pittsburgh too much. Villanueva did some of those more aggressive sets because he was a very big, long guy, but something you didn't see a lot in Pittsburgh last year. So it really is about not giving ground unless you have to, unless you're really threatened by a potential stunt or game or something like that. But again, it's all laid out in the article. So it is stuff that I think we haven't really seen in recent years. Meyer also has a great resume, longtime coach. He has bounced around quite a bit, but that is sometimes the life of the assistant. When head coaches get fired, then usually you're gone too as new coaching staffs come in. That happened to him with Mark Trestman in Chicago. He was actually with Trestman in Montreal in the CFL in 2012, followed Trestman to Chicago until he got fired in 2015. He was part of the Anthony Lynn coaching tree in Los Angeles from 2017 to 2019. Lynn got fired in 2020. Meyer was gone in 2019 as they kind of maybe a bit of a scapegoat thing as Lynn was trying to do something to potentially save his job. I think a similar thing happened in Carolina this year with Jackson being gone and Joe Brady, the OC in Carolina, being fired. Meyer, of course, being let go as well. So it's a little bit of that desperate last gasp, it seems like, from head coach Matt Rule. Meyer has a unique perspective and has done a lot of things as a coach. He's been a strength and conditioning coach, not only for a particular team, but the athletic department at NC State his last couple of years there. And he also ended up losing that job or ended up going elsewhere because that coach ended up getting fired at NC State in 2006, replaced by Tom O'Brien in '07. He's been a tight ends coach. He's been obviously an offensive line coach. He's been a consultant with Buffalo for a time, about 6, 7 years ago. And so he has a really unique perspective, also an offensive coordinator for Montreal Alouettes in 2012. That stint in the CFO and that team, that offense seemed to be pretty successful. So he's kind of been able to see the whole picture and work with different guys and have different experiences. And again, that does not guarantee success, but I do kind of like that on your resume. Obviously, offensive line is going to be one of the defining aspects of this team as it was in a negative way in 2021. And certainly this team, this front office, Mike Tomlin, Kevin Colbert, must add more talent to the room. Anytime you have good talent in that room, it's certainly going to make your offensive line and positional coaches look better overall. So that is a must to me. But in terms of guys on the roster, how well does Dan Moore show power and anchor? I think that's a real high priority for Meyer, who likes size and length and guys who are big and strong. Moore struggled with bull rushes last year throughout the entire season. He did get much better the second half of the year compared to the first half of the year, but I think his anchor will be really important in year two. And then Kendrick Green just working on that controlled aggression. Certainly, he needs to win early, and so being aggressive is going to be a good thing for him, but it's also a bad thing where if you miss, you're going to be in a lot of trouble. So working on hand placement, the independent hands, that's going to be the key factor for Kendrick Green's development or continued failure in 2022. And of course, on Saturday, the Steelers made big NFL news by hiring Brian Flores to be their senior assistant slash linebackers coach. Seems to be carrying a similar title as Terrell Austin, who was then, before being promoted to DC this year, the senior assistant slash secondary coach. So, Flores obviously working with the linebackers, not the secondary. But Terrell Austin, to me, was the de facto secondary coach. And so we'll see exactly how Flores fits in. Jerry Olsofsky still on the team site, still recognized as a linebackers coach. So I don't know exactly how that fit's going to be, but man, what a great hire for the Pittsburgh Steelers. I'm sure everyone is fairly well versed in what's happening to Flores beyond being a coach itself. The lawsuits he's filing against the NFL, against multiple teams, and how much those have merit. It's a little hard for me to say as an outsider who hasn't paid incredibly close attention to the situation. Obviously, he'll get his day in court and a chance to litigate his case, and so will the NFL and everybody he's suing, and we'll see what happens there. I think certainly some of those allegations are incredibly serious. But what I'm focused on and what I think Steeler fans care about the most is, can this guy coach? And the answer is a resounding yes. I mean, really, he should be probably still the head coach of the Miami Dolphins, at least at DC somewhere, probably head coach somewhere as well. But a really bright defensive mind from the Bill Belichick tree. That's where he's cut his teeth. Had some good Dolphins defenses, some ability to kind of maximize their group. You saw what they did against Baltimore this year with the cover zero that teams, including Pittsburgh, really began to adopt to try to slow down, and generally speaking, did slow down that Lamar Jackson and that Ravens offense. And so just a really strong hire, another bright mind in that room. And Pittsburgh's defensive coaching staff overall looks incredibly impressive. Now, I will say that I don't know how long Brian Flores will be in Pittsburgh. With his talent and resume and capability, this is a guy who should be a DC or head coach somewhere. So this may be just a 1 year bridge stint for Brian Flores, for all we know. Could be longer. You never know what could happen. But I don't think he's going to be an assistant in linebackers coach for too long in his NFL career. And I know some people are concerned about adding Flores with Minka Fitzpatrick, who was not happy with the way Flores misused him in Miami, kind of trying to use him as this was Army knife, the everything, corner, linebacker, box safety, free safety, and that really kind of led to Fitzpatrick working his way out of Miami and into Pittsburgh, where they've used him correctly as, generally speaking, a pure free safety, lurk robber type of guy. So I know there is some concern there, but Flores is a linebackers coach. He won't be coaching Minka specifically. And I think Flores would even recognize by now Pittsburgh's using him the correct way. And so I think any bad blood there, which I'm sure did exist for a time, is all probably water under the bridge. So those are the three hires. I don't mean to paint those as all home run hires. I think Flores really is overall. I think Jackson was a good hire, and Meyer, I'm probably the most concerned about, partially because of some of the guys and he's had drafted that never really developed under him. Guys like Deontay Brown didn't have a great rookie year overall. Forrest Lamp, and Sam Tevi, guys like that. So there is some concern there. But I think again, I called Meyer an average hire overall. But I just wanted to give my thoughts on who those guys are, what I think some of their core principles and coaching points are, teach points are, and how they'll hopefully integrate themselves in the Pittsburgh system and what they need to do to be successful and be a long-term member of the Steelers coaching staff. So hopefully you guys enjoyed this video. Let me know your thoughts about the hires of Frisman Jackson, Pat Meyer, and Brian Flores in the comments below. Again, appreciate you guys watching. Please like and subscribe if you have not done so already, and we'll talk to you soon.